I was a single dad drowning in the chaos of morning routines when I accidentally grabbed the wrong lunchbox at my son's school drop-off. When I opened it at work, expecting to find Johnny's leftover sandwich, I discovered a gourmet meal and a handwritten note from a mother to her daughter about being brave during her parents' divorce. Reading those words of love and encouragement broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time, because I realized I wasn't the only parent struggling to hold it together for their child. Before we begin, I have to ask, have you ever found comfort in knowing you're not alone in your struggles? Tell me about it in the comments below. And please, subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us we're all in this together. Now, let me take you back to that chaotic Tuesday morning that changed everything. 6 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I was married to my college sweetheart, Rebecca. We had a beautiful 7-year-old son named Johnny, and we lived in a picture-perfect suburban home with a white picket fence and a golden retriever named Buster. From the outside, we looked like the American dream come to life. But dreams, I learned, can shatter faster than you ever imagined possible. The end of my marriage wasn't dramatic or explosive. There were no affairs, no betrayals, no screaming matches that woke the neighbors. Instead, it was a slow, quiet erosion of everything we'd built together. Rebecca and I had simply grown into different people who wanted different things from life. She wanted adventure, travel, the freedom to pursue her art career without the constraints of suburban motherhood. I wanted stability, routine, the comfort of knowing that Johnny would wake up in the same house every morning with both his parents under the same roof. We tried counseling. We tried date nights and weekend getaways and all the things the self-help books recommended. But in the end, we had to face the painful truth that sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gap between two people who are heading in different directions. The divorce was amicable, as these things go. Rebecca moved to Portland to pursue her painting, and we agreed that Johnny would stay with me during the school year and spend summers and holidays with her. She wasn't abandoning him. She called every night, sent care packages, and flew back for every important event. But the day-to-day reality of raising a 7-year-old boy had become my responsibility alone, and I was failing spectacularly. The morning that changed my life started like every other morning since Rebecca left, with me running around our house like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to accomplish in 30 minutes what used to take 2 parents an hour. Johnny was sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, watching me burn his toast for the second time, while simultaneously trying to sign a permission slip for a field trip I'd forgotten about until I found the crumpled paper in his backpack. "Dad," Johnny said quietly, "my lunch." I looked at the clock. 7:45. School started at 8:15, and it was a 10-minute drive. I hadn't even started making his lunch. "Right, buddy. Lunch." "On it." I threw open the refrigerator and stared at its pathetic contents. A half-empty jar of peanut butter, some questionable-looking bread, a bruised apple, and a juice box that might have been there since before the divorce. This was not the carefully balanced, nutritious meal that Rebecca used to pack for him every morning, complete with cut vegetables, homemade cookies, and little notes of encouragement. I slapped together a peanut butter sandwich, tossed in the bruised apple and the juice box, and shoved everything into Johnny's worn-out lunchbox, a faded superhero design that had seen better days. "Dad," Johnny said again, still in his pajamas, "I need to get dressed." "Right, clothes, go, go, go." While Johnny ran upstairs to change, I tried to make myself presentable for work. I was a project manager at a mid-sized construction company, and I had an important client meeting at 9. I needed to look professional, competent, like a man who had his life together. Instead, I looked like someone who had slept in his clothes and forgotten to comb his hair. Johnny came back downstairs wearing his school uniform, his hair sticking up in 3 different directions. I wet my hand and tried to smooth it down while he squirmed away from me. "Dad, you're making it worse." "Sorry, buddy, we're just running a little late." "We're always running late," he said, and the matter-of-fact sadness in his voice hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. We were always late, always rushing, always forgetting something important. I was trying so hard to be both mother and father to him that I was failing at being either. The drive to Riverside Elementary was a blur of traffic lights and last-minute reminders. Remember, you have soccer practice after school. Mrs. Davis will pick you up and bring you to the field. I'll meet you there at 5:30. And don't forget to turn in that permission slip. I know, Dad. You told me yesterday and the day before. I pulled into the school parking lot with 2 minutes to spare, grabbed Johnny's backpack and lunchbox, and walked him to the entrance where the other parents were dropping off their children. This was always the hardest part of my day. Seeing the other families, the ones that still looked whole and happy and organized. There was Mrs. Lee, perfectly dressed in her yoga clothes, handing her daughter a lunch that probably contained organic everything. There was Mr. Roberts, calmly discussing the day's schedule with his twin boys while his wife organized their backpacks with military precision. And then there was me, disheveled and stressed, trying to remember if I'd packed Johnny's homework folder while simultaneously wondering if I had time to stop for coffee before my meeting. "Have a good day, buddy," I said, giving Johnny a quick hug. "I love you." "Love you too, Dad." And then he was gone, disappearing into the stream of children heading into the building. The drive to work was mercifully traffic-free, and I made it to the office with 5 minutes to spare. The client meeting went well. We were discussing a new shopping center project that could be a major win for the company, and for a brief hour and a half, I felt like the competent professional I used to be before my life fell apart. The rest of the workday passed in a blur of emails, phone calls, and project updates. At 3:15, I was back at Riverside Elementary for pickup, joining the familiar crowd of parents waiting for their children to emerge from the building. Johnny came running out with his usual burst of energy, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Dad, we had art class today, and I made you a picture of a dinosaur." "I can't wait to see it, buddy. How was your day?" "Good. Tommy brought his pet hamster for show and tell, and Mrs. Peterson let us hold him." We were walking toward the car when Mrs. Kloss, one of the school staff members who helped with pickup, called out to me, "Mr. Thompson, don't forget Johnny's lunchbox." She handed me a sleek, stainless steel lunchbox that looked expensive and well-designed. I took it automatically, distracted by Johnny's continued chatter about the hamster. "Thanks," I said, not really looking at it closely. It wasn't until we got home and I was unpacking Johnny's backpack that I really looked at the lunchbox. This definitely wasn't the worn-out superhero one I'd packed that morning. This one was elegant, modern, and probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. "Johnny?" I called out. "Is this your lunchbox?" He looked up from where he was sprawling on the living room floor with his dinosaur picture. "No, that's not mine. Mine has Captain America on it." My heart sank. Somewhere, another parent was probably discovering they had Johnny's beat-up lunchbox instead of this expensive one. I should call the school, I thought. But then curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what kind of lunch came in such a fancy container. I opened the latch and immediately knew I was looking at something special. This wasn't a hastily thrown-together meal like the ones I made for Johnny. This was a work of art. There was a perfectly crafted sandwich on artisanal bread cut into neat triangles and wrapped in parchment paper, fresh strawberries and blueberries in a small container, cut vegetables with a tiny container of homemade hummus, and what looked like a homemade chocolate chip cookie wrapped in tissue paper. But it was the note that stopped me cold. It was written on beautiful stationery in elegant handwriting, and it was addressed to "My Sweet Mabel." My darling girl, I know this week has been hard. I know you're confused about why Mommy and Daddy don't live in the same house anymore, and I know it makes you sad sometimes. But I want you to remember something very important. Just because our family looks different now doesn't mean we love you any less.
Daddy and I both love you more than all the stars in the sky and all the fish in the sea. We may not be married anymore, but we will always, always be your parents. We will always be here for you, even when we're not in the same room. You are the bravest, kindest, most wonderful little girl in the world, and I am so proud to be your mommy. When you feel sad or scared, remember that you carry a piece of my heart with you everywhere you go. Be brave today, my love. You've got this. All my love, Mommy. P.S. I made your favorite cookies. Save room for dessert. I had to stop reading halfway through because my vision was blurring with tears. This mother, this stranger's lunch I was holding, had put into words everything I'd been trying to say to Johnny for the past 6 months. Everything I'd been feeling, but couldn't quite express. I thought about my own fumbling attempts at explaining the divorce to Johnny, the awkward conversations about why Mommy lived far away now, the way his little face would scrunch up with confusion when he asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Why can't you and Mom just say sorry and be married again? He'd asked me just last week. It's complicated, buddy, I'd said, which is what I always said when I didn't know how to explain adult problems to a 7-year-old mind. But this mother, Mabel's mother, had found a way to be honest and reassuring at the same time. She'd acknowledged her daughter's pain while also giving her hope. She'd made it clear that divorce didn't mean the end of love, just a different kind of family. I carefully folded the note and put it back in the lunchbox, feeling like I'd accidentally read someone's diary, but I also felt something else. A strange sense of comfort in knowing that somewhere out there was another parent going exactly through what I was going through. Another parent trying to hold their child's world together while their own world was falling apart.
The next afternoon, I was standing outside Riverside Elementary, holding the elegant lunchbox and scanning the crowd of parents for someone who looked like they might own it. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Someone as put together as the lunch they'd packed, I supposed. I was still looking when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me, are you Marshall Thompson?" I turned around and found myself looking at a woman about my age with kind brown eyes and shoulder-length auburn hair that was escaping from what had probably started the day as a neat ponytail. She was wearing scrubs, medical scrubs, and she looked tired but determined. "Yes, that's me. You must be Mabel's mom." "Julie Bridgers," she said, extending her hand, "and I believe you have my daughter's lunch." I handed her the lunchbox, and she handed me Johnny's battered superhero one in return. For a moment, we just stood there, two parents in the middle of the afternoon pickup chaos, and I felt an odd reluctance to let this moment end. I packed Mabel's lunch in her backpack, actually, but there was enough for both of them, I told her to share. "I have to apologize," I said, thinking about the crumpled sandwich at the bottom of Johnny's backpack. "I accidentally opened your daughter's lunchbox. I saw she barely touched her food yesterday." "Thanks for telling me," she sighed. "Since she has been struggling lately, it has been difficult to get her to eat." "I'm sorry for that." I also saw the note. Julie's cheeks flushed pink. "Oh God, I'm so embarrassed. That was so personal, and you probably think I'm one of those helicopter parents who... No, I think you're an amazing mother. That note, it was beautiful. It was exactly what your daughter needed to hear." Julie looked surprised. "Really? Really? I've been struggling to find the right words to help my son understand our divorce, and you found them. You made something scary and confusing sound manageable." We were interrupted by the sound of children's voices as the school doors opened and kids began streaming out. I spotted Johnny immediately.
He had my dark hair and Rebecca's bright blue eyes, and he was walking with a little girl who had Julie's auburn hair and a face full of freckles. "Dad," Johnny called out, running over to us. "This is Mabel. We shared her lunch today." "I ate yours," Mabel said, grinning up at Johnny. "Johnny shared his sandwich with me at recess. Peanut butter. I loved it." I looked at Julie, and she looked at me, and we both smiled at the easy way our children had handled the situation that had caused us both so much anxiety. "Mom," Mabel said, tugging on Julie's scrubs, "can Johnny come over for a play date sometime? He's really nice, and he knows all about dinosaurs." "I love dinosaurs too," Julie said, looking down at her daughter with obvious affection. "What's your favorite?" "Triceratops, because they're herbivores, which means they only eat plants, and they had 3 horns for protection." "Very impressive," Julie said. "Mabel's favorite is the Brachiosaurus." "Because they're tall like giraffes," Mabel added. As our children chattered about dinosaurs, Julie and I found ourselves walking toward the parking lot together. It felt natural, comfortable, like we'd done this 100 times before. "So you mentioned you're going through a divorce too. Recently finalized. 6 months now. You?" 8 months. Still feels surreal sometimes." We stood there for a moment, 2 strangers who suddenly didn't feel like strangers at all. "This might sound crazy," I said, "but would you and Mabel like to get ice cream with Johnny and me? I mean, if you don't have plans. The kids seemed to get along, and I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "And you could use some adult conversation with someone who understands what you're going through?" Julie suggested, with a knowing smile. "Exactly." Julie looked at her daughter, who was still deep in dinosaur conversation with Johnny, then back at me. "You know what? That sounds perfect. There's a great ice cream place just down the street." And that's how I found myself sitting in a brightly colored ice cream parlor on a Tuesday afternoon, watching my son and a little girl I'd just met compare the merits of different dinosaur species, while their single parents tried to figure out how to navigate this new world of co-parenting and loneliness and hope. "So what do you do?" I asked Julie as the kids worked on their ice cream sundaes. "I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital," she said. "I work 3 12-hour shifts a week, which is great for being available for Mabel, but the schedule can be brutal." "That must be incredibly rewarding work." "It is. It's also heartbreaking sometimes, but there's nothing like helping a sick child feel better." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "What about you?" "Project manager for a construction company. Not nearly as noble as what you do, but it pays the bills and gives me flexibility for Johnny's schedule." "Flexibility is everything when you're doing this alone," Julie said, and there was something in her voice that told me she understood the constant juggling act of single parenthood. "Can I ask what happened with your marriage? I mean, you don't have to answer if it's too personal." Julie was quiet for a moment, watching Mabel peacefully eating her ice cream. "David, my ex-husband, is a good man, a good father, but he's also a workaholic who was never really present, even when he was physically there. He traveled constantly for his job, worked weekends, missed school plays and soccer games and bedtime stories." She paused, then continued. "I kept thinking it would get better when he got the next promotion, when the next big project was finished, when things settled down, but they never did. And I realized I was essentially already a single parent. I was just married to someone who wasn't really part of our daily life." I nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. "That must have been lonely." It was. And the worst part was that David didn't even realize how absent he'd become. When I finally told him I wanted a divorce, he was genuinely shocked. He thought providing financially was enough, that working hard to give us a nice house and good schools was the same as being a husband and father. Is he more involved now? He's trying to be. He has Mabel every other weekend and one night a week for dinner. It's awkward sometimes, but we're figuring it out. She looked at me curiously. What about you? What happened with your marriage? I took a sip of coffee, buying myself a moment to figure out how to explain the end of my marriage without making Rebecca sound like the villain. Because she wasn't. That was the hardest part. There was no one to blame, no clear reason why two people who had loved each other for over a decade had simply grown apart. Rebecca, my ex-wife, is an artist, a painter. When we met in college, she was this vibrant, creative person who saw beauty everywhere and wanted to capture it all on canvas. I fell in love with her passion, her spontaneity, the way she could find magic in ordinary moments.
I watched Johnny carefully stack his remaining gummy bears into a tower, the same methodical way he approached everything. So much like me, so different from his mother. But after Johnny was born, she started to feel trapped. Not by him, she loves him fiercely, but by the routine, the responsibility, the way motherhood seemed to consume every other part of her identity. She'd look at her easel covered in dust and feel like she was disappearing. Julie nodded, her expression understanding rather than judgmental. That must have been hard for both of you. It was. I kept trying to fix it, to give her more time to paint, to take on more of the household responsibilities. But the more I tried to create structure and stability for our family, the more suffocated she felt. And the more she pulled away, the more I doubled down on trying to hold everything together. I paused, remembering those last few months when we'd been living like polite strangers sharing a house. The final straw came when she got offered a residency program in Portland, a year-long opportunity to work with established artists and really develop her craft. It was everything she dreamed of, but it would mean leaving Johnny and me behind. Did you ask her not to go? No, I couldn't, because I could see how much she needed it, how much she'd been withering away in our suburban life. So I told her to go, and we'd figure out how to make it work long distance. Julie's eyes were soft with sympathy. But it didn't work. We tried for 3 months. Video calls every night, weekend visits when we could afford them, making plans for when she'd come back. But somewhere in those conversations, we both realized that she didn't want to come back. Not to our old life, anyway. She'd found herself again in Portland, and the person she'd become didn't fit into the life we'd built together. I looked at Johnny, who was now showing Mabel how to balance a spoon on her nose, both of them giggling at their silly game. The hardest part was that we still loved each other. We just loved different versions of ourselves, different ideas of what our life should look like. She needed freedom and adventure and the space to create. I needed stability and routine and the comfort of knowing where everyone would be at the end of each day. So she stayed in Portland? She did. We finalized the divorce 2 months ago. She calls Johnny every night, sends him care packages, flies back for important events. She's a good mother, just a long-distance one. Julie reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. That must be incredibly difficult. For both of you, but especially for Johnny. It's handling it better than I am, honestly. Kids are resilient in ways that constantly amaze me. He misses her, but he's adapted to our new normal faster than I have. What's the hardest part for you? I thought about that question. Really considered it. The loneliness, I guess. Missing having a partner in all the daily decisions. Someone to tag in when I'm exhausted. Someone to celebrate the small victories with. Someone who cares as much as I do about whether Johnny remembered to brush his teeth or turn in his homework. Yes, Julie said emphatically, exactly that. The weight of being the only adult who's responsible for everything.
Do you ever feel like you're failing? Like you're not enough for your daughter? Julie's laugh was rueful. Every single day. This morning I sent Mabel to school with mismatched socks because I forgot to do laundry. Yesterday I was 20 minutes late picking her up from dance class because I got stuck in surgery. Last week I completely forgot about picture day, so she's going to be the only kid in her class photo wearing a paint-stained t-shirt.
But you wrote her that beautiful note, I said. You made her that incredible lunch. You're doing so much more than you think you are. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, Julie admitted. I love my job, but the hours are unpredictable. I love being Mabel's mom, but I'm constantly worried I'm not giving her enough attention, enough stability, enough of whatever it is she needs. I understood that feeling completely. Johnny asked me last week why I always look worried. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but apparently I walk around with this constant expression of stress. Because we're constantly stressed, Julie said. We're trying to be two parents in one person, and it's exhausting. Mom, Mabel interrupted, tugging on Julie's sleeve. Can Johnny come to our house? I want to show him my dinosaur books. Julie looked at me questioningly. If you don't have other plans? Actually, that sounds great. Johnny's been asking for a play date, and I have to admit, I'm not ready for this conversation to end. Julie's smile was warm and genuine. Neither am I. An hour later, I was sitting in Julie's living room, watching Johnny and Mabel spread dinosaur books across her coffee table while she made us coffee in the kitchen. Her house was smaller than the one Rebecca and I had shared, but it felt warmer somehow. There were Mabel's drawings on the refrigerator, photos of the two of them at various adventures, and a general sense of a life being actively lived rather than just maintained. Your house feels like a home, I said when Julie returned with 2 steaming mugs. It's chaos most of the time, she said, settling onto the couch beside me. But it's our chaos. How long have you been here? We moved in right after the divorce was finalized. David kept the house. It made more sense financially. And honestly, I needed a fresh start. Too many memories in the old place. I nodded, understanding completely. Rebecca and I had sold our house and split the proceeds. I'd found a smaller place in the same school district, but some nights I still woke up reaching for her side of the bed. Do you miss it? Being married, I mean? Julie considered the question carefully. I miss the idea of it. I miss having someone to share the load with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, but I don't miss feeling like I was invisible in my own marriage. I don't miss the loneliness of being married to someone who was never really there. I miss the partnership, I said. Even when things were bad between me and Rebecca, we were still a team when it came to Johnny. Now I'm making all the decisions alone, and I'm constantly second-guessing myself. Like what? Everything. Should I let him quit piano lessons if he's not enjoying them, or should I make him stick with it to teach him about commitment? Is it okay that he wants to sleep with a nightlight, or should I be encouraging more independence? When he asks about dating, which he hasn't yet, but he will, how do I handle that conversation without his mother there? Julie laughed softly. Mabel asked me last week if she could marry her best friend Ella so they could have sleepovers every night. I had no idea how to explain that marriage is more complicated than wanting to have permanent sleepovers. What did you tell her? That marriage is when 2 grown-ups love each other so much they want to build a life together, and that she has plenty of time to figure out what kind of life she wants to build. That's actually a pretty good answer. I'm making it up as I go along, just like you are. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching our children bond over their shared love of prehistoric creatures. There was something peaceful about this moment. 2 adults having an actual conversation while their kids played happily nearby. It felt like something I'd been missing without even realizing it. Can I ask you something? Julie said eventually. Of course. Do you ever feel guilty about wanting adult companionship? Like you should be focused entirely on Johnny and not thinking about your own needs? The question hit closer to home than I had expected. All the time. Sometimes I catch myself wishing I had someone to talk to about my day,
someone to share a bottle of wine with after Johnny goes to bed. And then I feel selfish for wanting anything other than being his dad. I feel the same way. David has been asking if I'm dating anyone, and the question makes me feel guilty, even though we're divorced. Like wanting companionship somehow means I'm not devoted enough to Mabel. Are you dating, I mean? Julie shook her head. I went on one date about a month ago, a setup from a friend at work. The guy was nice enough, but I spent the entire evening talking about Mabel and worrying about whether she was okay with the babysitter. It wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fun for me. I haven't even tried yet. The idea of explaining my situation to someone new, of introducing another person into Johnny's life, it feels overwhelming. Plus, when would we even have time? Between work and parenting and just trying to keep up with laundry and groceries, I barely have time to shower some days. I laughed, recognizing the truth in that statement. Johnny asked me yesterday why I was wearing the same shirt 2 days in a row. I hadn't even noticed. Mabel told her teacher that Mommy eats cereal for dinner sometimes, which is true, but probably not something I wanted shared at parent-teacher conferences. Johnny announced to his entire soccer team that I don't know how to comb hair. Also true, but embarrassing when all the other parents are standing right there. We were both laughing now, finding humor in the small failures that had felt so overwhelming when we were facing them alone. You know what's funny, Julie said. I've been feeling like such a disaster as a single parent, but talking to you makes me realize that maybe I'm not doing as badly as I thought. I was just thinking the same thing. It's nice to talk to someone who understands that some days getting everyone fed and to school on time is a major victory. Dad, Johnny called from the floor. Look, Mabel has the same dinosaur encyclopedia that you got me. Mabel's mom got it for her too. I looked at the book he was holding up, a thick, colorful guide to prehistoric life that I had bought him for his last birthday. That's a great book. Your mom has good taste in dinosaur literature. We have the same favorite page. Julie and I exchanged a look over our children's heads. There was something sweet about the coincidence, about the way our kids had found common ground so easily. Mom, Mabel said, can Johnny stay for dinner? Please? We're having spaghetti, and he said it's his favorite. Julie looked at me questioningly. If you don't have other plans, I made enough for an army, as usual. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. Honestly, it would be nice to have dinner with other people for once. Mabel and I have gotten into the habit of eating in front of the TV, which I know is terrible, but it's easier than sitting at a table that feels too big for just the two of us.
I understood that feeling completely. Johnny and I had been doing the same thing, eating off TV trays in the living room because the dining room table felt like a monument to our incomplete family. In that case, we'd love to stay. Dinner was a revelation. Not because the spaghetti was particularly fancy, it was just sauce from a jar and noodles from a box, but because of how normal it felt, how right. Johnny and Mabel chattered about their day at school, comparing teachers and sharing stories about their classmates. Julie and I talked about work, about our kids, about the small details of daily life that had felt so isolating when we were managing them alone. This is nice, Johnny said as he twirled spaghetti around his fork. It feels like a family dinner. The comment hung in the air for a moment, and I saw Julie's eyes meet mine across the table. There was something vulnerable in her expression, a recognition of what Johnny had just articulated. It does feel like that, Mabel agreed. Like when Daddy used to live with us, except better because everyone's actually here. After dinner, we moved to the living room, where the kids continued their dinosaur research, while Julie and I cleaned up the kitchen together. There was something domestic and comfortable about the routine. She washed, I dried. We talked about everything and nothing. Thank you for this, I said, as I put the last plate away. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Adult conversation, shared responsibility, just feeling like part of something bigger than just Johnny and me. It should be thanking you, Julie said. I've been feeling so isolated lately,
Like I was the only person in the world trying to figure out how to be a good single parent. It's nice to know I'm not alone. You're definitely not alone. We stood there in her kitchen, two people who had been strangers 12 hours ago, but who now felt like old friends. There was something electric in the air between us, a recognition that this connection we'd found was rare and precious. "Marshall," Julie said softly, "I know this might sound crazy, but would you and Johnny like to come to the park with us this weekend? There's a playground Mabel loves, and they have picnic tables. We could bring lunch, let the kids play." Like a play date for the parents, too? Exactly like that. I smiled, feeling something light and hopeful unfold in my chest. I think that sounds perfect. That Saturday, we met at Riverside Park with homemade sandwiches and a cooler full of drinks. The kids ran straight for the playground while Julie and I spread a blanket under a large oak tree. It was one of those perfect autumn days. Crisp air, blue sky, leaves just beginning to turn gold and red. "I have a confession," Julie said, as we watched Johnny push Mabel on the swings. "I've been thinking about our conversation all week." "Good thoughts, I hope?" "The best thoughts. You made me realize that I've been so focused on what I'm not giving Mabel, a traditional two-parent household, a father who lives in the same house, the kind of stability I thought she needed, that I wasn't seeing what I am giving her." "Which is what?" "A mother who's present, who listens, who's learning to be brave in her own life, a home where she's the priority, where her needs come first. A chance to see that families can look different and still be full of love." I nodded, understanding completely. "Johnny told me yesterday that he likes our house better now because it's quieter and I'm not sad all the time. I didn't even realize I had been sad, but he was right. The last year of my marriage, I was walking around with this constant weight of disappointment and frustration. Now, even though things are harder in some ways, I'm happier." "Do you think they can sense that? Our kids?"
Absolutely. Johnny's been more relaxed, more talkative, more himself since the divorce was finalized. I think he was picking up on the tension between Rebecca and me, even when we thought we were hiding it. Julie was quiet for a moment, watching Mabel climb the monkey bars with fierce determination. "Mabel asked me last night if you and Johnny were going to be our family now." My heart skipped a beat. What did you tell her? I told her that families come in all different shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves. That's a beautiful way to put it. She said she hopes we choose each other. I looked at Julie, really looked at her. The afternoon sun was catching the red highlights in her hair, and there was something peaceful about her expression as she watched our children play together. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was kind and strong and real in a way that made me want to know everything about her. "Julie, I need to tell you something." She turned to face me, her expression open and curious. "I haven't felt this comfortable with another person in years. Not just attracted to, though I am, but genuinely comfortable, like I can be myself without pretending to have everything figured out." "I feel the same way," she said softly. "It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. I don't want to rush anything or complicate things for our kids, but I also don't want to pretend that this is just a friendship." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'd like to see where this goes. Slowly, carefully, with our children's well-being as the priority, but I'd like to try." Julie's smile was radiant. "I'd like that too." We were interrupted by the sound of running feet as Johnny and Mabel raced back to our blanket, both of them breathless and grinning. "Mom!" Mabel called out. "We found a family of ducks by the pond. Can we go feed them?" "Do we have anything ducks can eat?" I asked, looking through our picnic supplies. "I brought some crackers," Julie said, pulling a sleeve of saltines from her bag. "But we should break them into small pieces." As we walked toward the pond, Johnny slipped his hand into mine, and Mabel's took Julie's hand. Without planning it, without even thinking about it, Julie and I found ourselves walking with our children, creating a natural bridge between us. The ducks were delighted with the crackers, and we spent a peaceful half-hour watching them paddle around the pond, while our kids took turns tossing small pieces of food into the water. There was something magical about the moment, the four of us standing together by the water, sharing this simple pleasure. "This feels right," Julie said, quietly, so only I could hear. "It does. It really does." Over the next few weeks, we fell into a natural rhythm. Julie and I would text throughout the day, sharing funny stories about our kids, commiserating our work stress, making plans for the weekend. Johnny and Mabel had become inseparable, and their friendship gave Julie and me the perfect excuse to spend more time together. We had dinner together twice a week, alternating between our houses. We took the kids to movies, to the zoo, to the children's museum. We helped each other with the practical aspects of single parenting. I picked up Mabel from dance class when Julie got stuck at work. She took Johnny to soccer practice when I had a late meeting. But more than that, we were building something together, something that felt like family. The first time Johnny called Julie Miss Julie instead of Mabel's mom, I saw her eyes filled with tears. The first time Mabel asked if I could help her with her math homework because Marshall is really good at numbers, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with romantic attraction and everything to do with being accepted, being needed, being part of something bigger than myself. It was 6 weeks after our first accidental lunch swap when Julie and I had our first real date. We'd been spending so much time together as a family unit that we'd never actually been alone together, just the two of us. Julie's neighbor, Mrs. Brown, offered to watch both kids for the evening, and we decided to go to a small Italian restaurant downtown. It felt strange at first, sitting across from each other without Johnny and Mabel's chatter filling the silence, but it also felt wonderful to have Julie's undivided attention. "I have something to tell you," she said over appetizers. "David came by last week to pick up Mabel, and he asked if I was seeing someone." My heart clenched slightly. "What did you tell him?" I told him yes. I told him I was seeing someone wonderful, someone who makes me happy, someone who's good to Mabel. She reached across the table and took my hand. I told him I was falling in love. The words hung in the air between us, beautiful and terrifying and absolutely true. "I'm falling in love too," I said. "With you, with Mabel, with the life we're building together." "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted, "but also more hopeful than I've been in years." We talked through dinner about our fears, our hopes, our dreams for the future. We talked about how to blend our families without losing the individual relationships we'd built with our children. We talked about the practical considerations, whose house we'd eventually live in, how to handle holidays and birthdays, what to do about Rebecca and David and the complicated dynamics of co-parenting with ex-spouses. But mostly we talked about love, about how sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places, about how two broken families can heal each other and become something stronger than either was alone. When we got back to Mrs. Brown House to pick up the kids, we found them asleep on her couch, Johnny's arm thrown protectively over Mabel's shoulders. They looked like siblings, like they'd been family their whole lives. "They're good children," Mrs. Brown said softly. "They take care of each other." Julie and I looked at each other over our sleeping children, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. This was our family, not the family either of us had planned, but our family nonetheless. Sometime later, on a snowy Saturday morning in December, I woke up in Julie's house, our house really, since I'd been staying over more nights than not, to the sound of children's laughter from the kitchen. I found Johnny and Mabel making pancakes with Julie, all three of them covered in flour and grinning like conspirators. "Dad," Johnny called out when he saw me, "we're making breakfast for you. Mabel taught me how to flip pancakes." "And Johnny taught me how to make them perfectly round," Mabel added. Julie looked up from the stove, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face glowing with happiness. "Good morning, sleepy head. Coffee's ready." I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, watching my family, because that's what they were now, my family, work together to create something delicious. There was flour on every surface, syrup somehow on the ceiling, and more batter on the kids than in the pan. But it was perfect.
"You know what today is?" Julie asked, sliding a stack of pancakes onto a plate. "Saturday?" I guessed. "It's exactly 1 year since the lunchbox mix-up." I looked at her in surprise. "Has it really been a year?" 365 days since you accidentally took Mabel's lunch and read my note. "Best mistake I ever made," I said, pulling her into my arms. "Dad," Johnny said, tugging on my pajama pants, "are you going to marry Julie?" The question came out of nowhere, delivered with the casual directness that only children possess. Julie and I looked at each other, both of us suddenly aware that our children were watching us with intense interest. "Would you like me to marry Julie?" I asked Johnny. "Yes," he said immediately. "Then Mabel would be my sister for real, and we could live in the same house all the time." "What about you, Mabel?" Julie asked. "How would you feel if Marshall and I got married?" Marshall considered this seriously, her little face scrunched up in concentration. "Would that mean Marshall would be my dad too?" "He'd be your stepdad," Julie explained gently. "You'd still have your daddy, but Marshall would be part of our family too." "And Johnny would be my brother?" "Your stepbrother, yes." Mabel nodded decisively. "I think that would be good. Marshall makes really good grilled cheese sandwiches, and Johnny shares his toys." Julie and I burst out laughing at her practical assessment of our relationship. "Well," I said, "if grilled cheese sandwiches and toy sharing are the criteria for marriage, I think I'm qualified." "There might be a few other requirements," Julie said with a smile. "Like what?" "Like loving each other," Johnny said seriously, "and taking care of each other when someone's sick, and not fighting about stupid stuff." "Those are very good requirements," I agreed. "What do you think, Julie? Do I meet the qualifications?" "I think you exceed them," she said softly. That afternoon, while the kids built a snowman in the backyard, Julie and I sat by the window with our coffee, watching them work together to roll the perfect snowball for the head. "Are we really talking about marriage?" Julie asked. "Because a year ago, I was convinced I'd never want to get married again." "A year ago, I was convinced I was a failure as a single parent. Funny how much can change." "I love you, Marshall. I love the man you are, the father you are, the way you've embraced Mabel as your own. I love the family we've created together." "I love you too. I love your strength, your compassion, the way you make everything feel possible. I love that you saw something worth saving in a divorced dad who couldn't even pack a decent lunch for his kid." "You were never a failure," Julie said firmly. "You were just a man doing his best in an impossible situation. Just like I was a woman doing her best in an impossible situation. We found each other and we made it possible." Sometimes the best things in life come from the mistakes we make, the wrong turns we take, the moments when our carefully planned lives fall apart and force us to build something new. Sometimes a simple mix-up of lunchboxes can lead to the greatest love story of your life.
And sometimes, when you're brave enough to read a stranger's note and reach out with compassion, you discover that you're not alone in your struggles, and that the person you're meant to love has been looking for you too.
An absolutely beautiful story about how two broken families found healing in each other, all because of a simple lunchbox mix-up and a mother's love letter. What do you think of the way Marshall and Julie built their relationship, slowly, always putting their children first? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this heartwarming story of unexpected love and blended families, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more emotional stories that celebrate the power of human connection. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.